Dr. Ronald Yonaguska Holloway is the principal chief of the last known indigenous Lenape tribe in the state of New Jersey. He is a United States Marine veteran, held 7 security licenses, and has a doctorate in theology. He is a blood chief of a traditional tribe known as the Sandhill Indian Nation. The Sandhill Indian Nation is a first contact tribe and was historically considered to be the grandfather tribe of the Eastern Woodland Native Americans. A first contact tribe is a Native American nation that had first greeted the Europeans when they landed in the Americas. For expediency, we will refer to the Sandhill Indian Nation as the Sandhill during the rest of this series. Throughout the years, the Sandhills had remained hidden within the cities, suburbs, and rural areas of New Jersey, blending in with the populations of those areas until the 1930s and 1940s. The Smithsonian in 1948 released a report of the Native Americans still living in the United States. Amongst the tribes mentioned were the Sandhills. New Jersey Governor Driscoll, during his tenure, publicly acknowledged the existence of the Sandhills as living in the state of New Jersey. Up until present day, the Sandhills have stayed behind the scenes with the exception of their chief. In the mid-2000s, the present Sandhill chief came out publicly because of a fraudulent report signed by former Governor Corzine that disregarded the facts as recorded accurately by the Smithsonian, causing 30,000 to 40,000 Native Americans to disappear on paper from the state of New Jersey, though they existed in the United States Census. Since that time, the Sandhill has been seeking independent recognition as a sovereign entity, separate and apart from the BIA. The Sandhill chief has recently joined in the battle to stop hydrofracking in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. From this point onward, hydrofracking will be referred to as fracking. To leave comments, please go to sandhillindiannation@gmail.com. How were you chosen to be chief?
The traditional way. My father had been chief before me, and as he got into his 70s, he was unable to keep up with the pace, so he resigned his position, and at our annual council meeting, he nominated me to succeed him, being his oldest son and next in line, and that was unanimously adopted by the council, and I became chief that day.
How far back does your ancestry go?
Well, we've had bones returned to us by Dr. DeStefano from the Patterson Museum, and those bones have been linked to us. Roughly 2,000 years is where we came back on the DNA testing on them, and it was a direct match to my family. So my family has been walking around New Jersey and Pennsylvania since about the time Jesus was walking around in the Middle East, documented.
How large is your tribe?
Currently, we are right about 1,000 members if you include the men, women, and children. So it's a good size. 1,000 members is a pretty significant number.
Does your tribe have a reservation?
We had a reservation up until 1802. It was located on the outskirts of Wharton State Forest in New Jersey. It was also referred to as the Brotherton Reservation. That land was taken, parceled off, and sold without our permission, and the state of New Jersey has subsequently never replaced it with another one or given it back to us.
What is the concept of sovereignty?
From a universal standpoint, it's the right to self-determination, but from the context that we're talking about, it's conceptually where our group of people, our community, which has historically been in the area for centuries, would have the right to self-govern, to have our own recognized government, our own land base, our own infrastructure, business, etc. Make the things that are necessary for us to decide what determinations we need to make without interference from the BIA, without the trust system which exists now through the federal government, which basically any tribe can make money, but then they have to turn it over to this trust system, and then the trustors, being the government, determine whether or not you can use the money and what you can use it for. So basically, you make the money, they take the money, then you have to ask permission to get your money back. What we're saying is sovereign people who were here before Columbus accidentally made a left-hand turn and ran into a continent should have the right to be able to manage themselves like we did, but within the context of cooperation inside the United States. We understand that this is a contiguous country, but Native Americans would be sovereign the same way a county is sovereign or a city, kind of that concept.
You have been trying to become a recognized sovereign Indian nation. How is your plan to establish yourself on a homeland different than how other Indian nations have existed?
Well, currently, the system as we see it from the way the United States government operates with what they call federally recognized tribes is they put you on a reserved piece of land, which the tribe doesn't own. It's still owned by the United States federal government, so there's no control there. The assets underneath the land are managed by MMS, and they can come in and take them, sell them off, and then give you a cut or whatever they determine you're entitled to. What we are suggesting and what we have proposed is that tribes be given an opportunity to have a startup, if you would. The concept is one bite at the apple. Wall Street would consider it to be a startup, where you're funded, you get enough money to put your infrastructure together, to run your businesses, to manage your own affairs, and then that's it. You don't have any more money coming in from the federal government, and you are forced to run your nation, your tribe, as if it were a city or a county or a state, balanced budgets, no deficit, revenue to be able to take care of your own people. That is in stark contrast to what is happening inside the United States now. The United States has created basically a welfare state. You have individuals sitting on a reservation waiting for a check to come in, and that's morally wrong. It's wrong from a taxpayer standpoint because it puts an unnecessary burden on the taxpayers throughout the whole country. True sovereignty means true responsibility, the ability to run your affairs and step up and be sovereign.
Are you involved with the United Nations?
Yes, I have been for some years. I sit on an NGO committee, which is a non-governmental organization that is attached to the Indigenous Forum. The Indigenous Forum is a body that meets at the UN every year for a few weeks, just the same as you have the General Assembly, and we discuss issues that are pertinent to indigenous peoples around the globe. It can be Peru or Paraguay, it doesn't make any difference, but we take an active role in advising the UN in how they should view these indigenous peoples and groups and what type of support should be given, as well as advising the member states of the organization on what we think is appropriate protocol and considerations for things like extractive industries, free, prior, and informed consent. And occasionally I travel and give talks, with UNICEF or any other United Nations body that needs someone to come and speak about indigenous issues, how things are affecting indigenous women or indigenous men, and those considerations.
How did you first become aware of fracking?
My first introduction to it was through Josh Fox's movie Gasland. It was a number of years ago. I was invited to a showing in Manhattan before it had gone public and was appalled at what I saw. Later on, I saw his most recent preview, Gasland 2, which was a fabulous documentary, and had an opportunity to talk with Mr. Fox and compare thoughts on what was going on, since he's not too far geographically from where I was living, and just take a look at what was going on. And it's really quite disturbing, the amount of pollution that's going into destroying aquifers. What's even more interesting that Mr. Fox brought out is that if you follow the pattern, you can see that aquifers in front of where fracking goes in are actually purchased, and they're set aside, and mysteriously, and it's probably just a coincidence because you know how those things are, but the fracking goes in, those aquifers get polluted, and the only ones left are the ones that was purchased in advance of fracking coming in. It would seem like somebody's accidentally cornering the water market.
Shouldn't tribes be notified when land is going to be disturbed for energy and gas exploration or activities?
In theory, yes, and that would be in compliance with President Obama's executive order stating that the tribe of record should be notified when anything's supposed to happen on their land. It's a concept of free, prior, and informed consent again. In the case of our tribe, mysteriously FERC and Kinder Morgan and Tennessee Pipe misplaced us in their records and their addresses, even though we are acknowledged by the White House as being the tribe of record, because we have advised the president and sat on his appointed committee for offshore power on the continental shelf off the coast of New Jersey. So there seems to be a disconnect there, but in theory the president has instructed that tribes be notified, yes.
Why wasn't your tribe notified?
Depending on who you talk to, they say it was a typo, they didn't get the memo. I find it very interesting that the White House has no problem getting correspondence to us, or the Department of the Interior, or the Department of Energy, who send us. But mysteriously, Kinder Morgan, Tennessee Pipe, and FERC all of a sudden couldn't find our address to forward anything to us. So we'll blame the Postal Service, I guess.
What is FERC?
FERC is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
What waterways rights does your tribe have in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and how did these rights come about?
Well, all rights that Indian nations have as a whole have their basis in law, the law being treaty law, which all scholars agree treaty law supersedes constitutional law. Our treaties go back, being a first contact tribe naturally, we are the ones who dealt with the British government when they were here. So we have treaties going back, the Treaty of Easton, the Treaty of Fort Pitt, and you just can run down all the lists. We had agreements with the British government before the United States came into being. The most notable one being the Treaty of Fort Pitt, which was signed between the United States and the Delaware Nation. That gave the Delaware Nation a guarantee of a 14th state in the new fledgling country, with equality and senatorial representation. That treaty is still in effect and on the books. It has never successfully been able to be enforced because not too many years later, President Jackson, everybody remembers that famous case where the Cherokee won, and then he went, well, that's really nice, the Supreme Court can say what they want, let's see them enforce it. And he rounded up the Cherokees and most of the Delaware and then marched them off to Oklahoma, which was the Indian Territories, and eventually then, mysteriously, all of a sudden became a state without the Indians being able to vote. So it's just a fascinating series of coincidences. But these treaties, which are the basis of law, guaranteed us access to the Delaware River, coastal access for fishing and hunting. And if you take a look at the Winters water right case, which is probably one of the most famous Indian law cases in the 20th century, the Supreme Court ruled that all land set aside by reservation by the federal government for Indians, all the water on the surface, all the water adjacent to and underneath, is the property of the Indians on that land. Using those legal bases, we have rights to the Delaware River, the Susquehanna, and to coastal access for fishing off the coast of New Jersey. That, if you take a look at traditional Indian water title on the coast, extends 2.5 miles, about a half mile short of the international boundary. So that would go across Manhattan and out to the ocean on that side. So that's where our rights come from.
Why are the highlands so critical to preserve?
From an environmental standpoint, the highlands are some of the most pristine forests on the eastern seaboard. Gorgeous trees, wildlife, deer, fox, eagles, hawks, birds, fish, streams and rivers. I mean, it's just incredible. But from a spiritual standpoint, it's some of the most sacred land to the Native Americans, to the Lenape, especially Sunrise Mountain, which has been sacred for thousands and thousands of years.
So this area that is proposed to be disturbed by the new pipeline is considered sacred land to the Lenape.
Oh, without a doubt. When you take a look at some of the damage that's going on right now, if you could picture a football field wide path of trees just clear cut, coming over mountains and through valleys, then coming right up to the edge of the Delaware, dredging underneath the Delaware River, and then coming up on the other side in New Jersey, and the same thing going through the Highlands. It's a travesty. If you could picture, if you would, everybody has some type of religious affiliation. If you could picture running 5 30-inch pipelines underneath the Dome of the Rock, the Muslim community would go berserk. If you tried to do the same thing under the Wailing Wall, the Jewish community would come unglued. If you tried to run it underneath the Vatican, the rest of Christianity would go just mind-boggling berserk. That's how important it is to us. So they're going to run pipelines through these areas, which are traditional areas for the Lenape people. All along the Delaware, the secondary camp was in Newton. The fishing was all along the Delaware between Montague and Milford. And right now they're building a pumping station in Milford and running these lines from Milford under the Delaware, bouncing it off an island, and then into Montague. So we've got bones there, pottery shards, old campsites, burial mounds, and then you have holy places. I mean, it's just incredible what they're doing.
Do you feel that your water rights in the states of New Jersey and Pennsylvania would interfere with the gas company's plan to build liquefied natural gas facilities and pipelines to export fracked gas overseas?
Without a shadow of a doubt. If you take a look at water rights, let's look at the broader picture for a second. The fracked gas that's coming out of Pennsylvania, as well as the liquid gas that they're pumping from underneath the ground, is technically our resources. Okay, so first of all, they're taking all of this without permission. Then they're cutting down the forests, they're dredging up the river, they're destroying more forests, and then they're running it through burial grounds and everything else. Okay? It's abhorrent, but it's ours. So if we were able to enforce it, which we believe and know that we can, it's beyond belief, we've already looked at it, they would not only not be able to pump this stuff, they wouldn't be able to send it across the Delaware, because the Delaware is a navigable river. The island that they're bouncing the pipes off are in the center of the Delaware. Now, under Admiralty law or maritime law, stolen goods can't be transported in a navigable ocean or river. We've notified them that we can prove that these goods are ours, and they haven't stopped, naturally. But to take it further, if you go across the mountain and through New Jersey like they're planning to the ironbound, they want to put this stuff on ships and ship it overseas. So now you have an international offense because you're shipping stolen goods. Traditionally, the oil companies have hidden behind their lobbyists and everybody else that they can get money into in the governmental corridors, we'll say. When you go after a case like this and you go under maritime law or admiralty law, the situation changes because you're dealing with an international offense. The United States is not a member that abides by the World Court, but they are a member that adheres to international trade and maritime law. So what's going to happen eventually is it's going to be a case that's heard in federal court but under admiralty law, because that is our river, our assets, and where they're shipping from is ours, and we can prove it by treaty.
What steps have you taken to address the fracking threat and to stop the pipeline through the Highlands?
Well, initially we went to federal court. We asked for an emergency injunction against continued digging and dredging and bulldozing and all the other things that they were doing. The judge heard us within one calendar court day, which was very nice. However, the ruling was that unless we could prove an overwhelming sense of urgency and that what was happening to our product was more important than the hundreds of millions of dollars that Kinder Morgan had put into the project, he wasn't going to allow that. So he dismissed it pending our coming back. It was dismissed without prejudice. He just said, no, until you can prove that, this is more important than $250 million, I'm not going to give you the injunction. So we began rewriting the case. In the interim, we served Kinder Morgan a cease and desist notice, which I served myself on their offices in Milford, and which was served in their offices in Texas. We are currently drafting our court case for filing. We are putting on more attorneys. We are looking at putting on an environmental specialist attorney, as well as another admiralty law attorney. And for any nonprofits out there, be it the Sierra Club or any environmental groups, we would encourage them to please contact us, especially if they have excess legal capacity, which help us to be able to prosecute this case and stop what's going on.
Do you plan on bringing your case and or other future cases to The Hague?
That's a good question. To me, it would seem as that would be an eventuality. And we've had some issues with our treaty not being respected, and the governments of both the states and the federal level hiding behind sovereign immunity. So I've delivered a tremendous volume of documents to the Special Rapporteur at the United Nations, and he's been looking into the matter on our behalf. However, given the fact that the upcoming litigation is based upon maritime law and admiralty law, the oil companies will not have the ability to hide behind the federal government, which they normally do. They're really good at bludgeoning people from behind, which means they're going to have to fight in open court, and the U.S. can't defend them, which will give us an opportunity to be able to present to the international community our treaties and have that body rule on the validity of our land claims.
Given that you have attended meetings in the White House over the past 5 years in an attempt to become the first Native American nation that can provide for itself and be totally independent of the U.S. government, when President Obama suddenly approved of fracking, and on these very lands under discussion in Pennsylvania and New Jersey that are mentioned in the Sandhill Tribal Plans report, previously left in the White House with the administration, do you feel that the Obama administration has been less than forthcoming in its dealings with the tribe?
Boy, that's a big question. Less than forthcoming. I would say that there are elements within the administration that have a separate agenda than Mr. Obama does. There's an element in the government now that would like to see the Native American issue go away. It's kind of really distasteful to have the original landowners still around and claim that the land is yours. There seems to be a growing swell of, we stole this fair and square and I thought we killed you guys. So that's wandering around some of the hallways in the government. But do I think Mr. Obama himself has dealt with us unfairly? No, I believe that elements beneath him have either not fully briefed him or actually not given him a copy of our proposals. We've left on 3 separate occasions proposals at the Eisenhower building and in the White House with members of his staff, but as of yet we haven't heard officially from him. I would welcome a discussion with Vice President Biden or Mr. Obama just to give them an overview or explain any questions that they might have, or even bring them another copy for them. But I don't believe he's directly involved in being unkind to us.
Do you feel that this is why the Obama administration is ignoring your plans for sovereignty?
I don't think, again, that Mr. Obama directly or Vice President Biden are deliberately ignoring us. But what I believe is individuals who have seen this, because we know who it's been passed to in the Eisenhower building and which offices it's gone to, are uncomfortable with the concept of Native Americans being truly sovereign and working in conjunction with the United States as opposed to through a trustee relationship. So it's the whole concept of blood quantums, which everybody talks about, is to phase out Native Americans so that we legally don't exist. But the concept is flawed, because how can your first cousin not be related to you because you're a percentage off on blood quantum? It makes no sense. The traditional Indian view is, if you have a drop of my blood, you are family. And in a lot of the nations, there's not even a word for cousin. You're just family. So I would say that it's the element inside the administration, either deliberately or subconsciously, and it's bubbling to the surface, that is dealing with us in an unfair manner. And our proposal is really in the best interest of the country. It provides for hundreds of billions of dollars in savings through the Department of the Interior over decades. The numbers are in there. It provides for farm facilities, cutting-edge technology. We've gone to the trouble of visiting 7 universities and having PhDs sign off on our proposal. Aeroponics, hydroponics, cutting-edge technology that the U.S. desperately needs to feed its people. It's a national security issue, food security. It's a tax issue. If you can get a whole administrative department inside the federal government to not have to spend the money, then you don't have to raise taxes and you can balance the budget. How long have we been fighting over a balanced budget? If the Native American community develops infrastructure and puts jobs together and can run themselves and begins hiring people, then those people spend money. It's just a whole great element, but then there's those people that are scared that it would succeed.
Traditionally, the United States has not done justice for the Native American nations.
Sorry, it's kind of a funny concept, but go on.
Should I read that again? Traditionally, the United States has not done justice for the Native American nations. What would you like to see for your tribe and for other nations as well? Currently, what do you see as the largest problems, and what would you like to see corrected?
There are 2 parts that you've asked there, and I will tell you, I had a conversation with a fabulous African-American woman, and we were talking about slavery and how unfair it was. And in the end, it was a fabulous presentation she had. And my comment was, I wholeheartedly understand and sympathize with you, but if you can understand the Native American perspective, we were genocidally slaughtered to make room for the enslavement of your people. So it's very, very interesting. It's a touchy subject. The Native American joke is, out of the 1,000 treaties that have been written, 999 have been broken. So what I would like to see happen is the removal or the ceasing of the deliberate marginalization of Native Americans, to move us from 3rd class and in some cases 4th class citizens. If you take a look at some of the reservations, they're concentration camps. Dirt floors, the average age of a male Native American dying on a reservation is somewhere between 52 and 55, depending on who you talk to. And more than 60% of those deaths are from violent death. There's a disconnect there between what's going on with the original peoples of this continent and what's going on in mainstream society. I believe that Native Americans need to be reintegrated into the community, into the nation as a whole. The concepts that they have, the understanding of how to work with the globe, the global consciousness, because the planet's alive. How they understand how everything is interconnected needs to be exported from the Native American communities into the country as a whole to raise the consciousness. If you have that consciousness of you don't take more than you need, you give back, you don't pollute, you look for a chief. My commission was, I have to always look 7 generations out, not 7 business quarters or 7 weeks or 7 days like the market is managed, but what's going on with my great-great-greats. We've lost touch with that. We've become we're going to take this now, everybody else can fend for themselves later, which is why the economy and the environment are in the crisis that it's in. So the problem is Native Americans don't exist except in the movies, and that's not the case. There's 7 million of us here and growing. We're not going away. Reintegrate us, listen to us. We can tell you how to dig yourself out of the hole that you're in, how to bring back vitality to the planet. and how to raise the consciousness of the individual so that we can all live together, because we're all connected by virtue of the fact that we're human and we live on this planet.
What do you think about the climate change report coming out of the United Nations this week?
I find it to be overdue. I know that there's a bit of back and forth on it as to whether or not the temperature of the air is going up, or is it staying stationary after increases. But the one thing that's clear is that the temperature of the water is going up, which is absolutely frightening. After years and years of the air ambient temperature going up, now the water's going up, which increases the melt of the ice pack, which begins a desalinization process, not enough salt in the ocean, which slows down the Gulf Stream, which means the hurricanes that we're experiencing now are the norm, and they increase. I happen to support a global carbon footprint. Everything that we have proposed in our package, which is sitting or has sat on the president's desk or in his inbox, whether or not somebody actually let him read it is a bit of a question there, but addresses the fact through role modelship of using cutting edge green technology, using green mass biodiesel technology, which has just been patented, the little solar dots on the roll down window shades, which has just been patented, to run facilities, to take us away from 10,000, 20,000 pound cars that get 7 or 8 miles to the gallon. You don't need to drive a tank to school. Your kid is safe. All of these things have to be looked at, and that UN report is a fabulous report. It says, you know what, we got a problem here. The U.S., as 5% of the world's population, cannot consume 40% of its goods. It's just not morally right. The oil companies have too big of a hold on D.C., and more than 60% of the reserves have been used. What's going to happen? I mean, it's just perpetuating the crisis matches perpetuating the debt. You're just pushing stuff off till next week. It's not dealing with the problem. The UN proposal addresses that. Let's get at least a global carbon footprint. Not one where you can trade chits back and forth and, okay, well, I can pollute more if I buy yours from you. Just no.
What final thoughts would you like to leave with us?
I believe that the proposals that have been left with various administration members at the White House should be legitimately looked at. I would challenge the White House to allow myself and some of my staff to come and meet with Vice President Biden or President Obama himself. I understand they're busy. There's nuclear problems here and chemical warfare there, and there's a lot going on. However, an opportunity to bring together the latest technology with the minds coming out of the universities to make aeroponic and hydroponic facilities of a massive scale, bringing food close to where the people live, is a fabulous idea. It's a domestic security issue. It's an educational issue. It's a scientific issue. All of these things come together, and it's good for the future of the country. Let us come in and talk to somebody who really wants to listen. Let us show the numbers, and then let us show you how it can be done. That's the challenge that I would like to give to the administration.
Thank you, Chief Holloway.
Thank you.